Millions of Americans are already voting to decide the shape of the next Congress ahead of polling day tomorrow. The outcome of the midterms will help to shape the course of the second half of Trump's term, with the Democrats hopeful they can grab control of the House and possibly also the Senate from the Republicans. Let's bring in the people that really understand these numbers. Peter Trubowtiz is the Professor for International Relations at the London School of Economics. Dominic Armstrong is my markets guest host this morning, co-founder of Horatius Fund Management. Let me bring it to you first of all, Peter. A very warm welcome to the show, I could say.
Good to be here.
You come up with a very interesting line. As we go to these polls, just how critically important it is for the Democrats to take the House. You say if they don't, they're under an existential threat. Is it as serious as that?
Yes, I think the Democrats have put all their eggs, in a sense, in this basket. They've generated more cash in this midterms than any prior midterm. They've put in more new candidates running. I mean, lots of women, lots of millennials. They've really invested very heavily. The polls show that they're likely to take the House. I think it would be a huge disappointment if they don't. Moreover, Donald Trump, as Speaker Speaker of the House of Representatives, Ryan said yesterday's tried to hijack the election by turning it into a vote or a referendum on immigration, and as opposed to running on the economy, and basically playing to cultural grievances of white blue-collar voters. That worked in 2016, but many wrote it off as a kind of fluke. If it works this time, I think people will think differently.
Do you think that healthcare will become a more pressing issue rather than the visuals of a caravan moving towards the borders of the United States of America, which, it should be said, is still quite a considerable distance away? What is this battle going to come down to? Is it going to be the dollars in my pocket, healthcare, or immigration? What's the battle on the ground?
Well, I mean, it's really come down to healthcare and immigration, or another way to put that is, what are Americans most afraid of? Are they afraid of losing coverage on pre-existing conditions, or are they afraid of people crossing the southern border? And if you look at the polls, right now, the single most important issue is healthcare. 40% of Americans define that as the single most important issue, more important than the economy. 25% consider immigration the most important issue. But I think so the key thing is whether or not, and those people that are defining health care as a critical issue are primarily Democrats, but also independents. And independents are the voters that nobody's talking about in this election because it's so polarized between Democrats and Republicans. But if independents show up at the polls, it will make a difference.
Dominic, can I bring it to you from a market perspective? We've heard Peter talk about the existential threat to the Democrats. What would it mean for markets if the Democrats do take the House?
Well, I think what we see then is the classic checks and balances coming back in, which in this term actually probably means gridlock. And actually, ironically, markets quite like the concept of a proper check on some of the more esoteric and extreme actions that we've seen from the president. And actually, I think markets would welcome that sort of check in place, even if it does mean gridlock on certain policies. That will lock down the situation, and we'll have 2 years at least with a sort of predictable lack of the unpredictable.
Dominic, can I ask you, we had the data on Friday and we saw this fairly fantastic set of numbers in terms of jobs, unemployment at 40, 50-year low, and wages. And this is why I put it into the GTV library. And Peter, I'd like you to have a look at this as well, which is wages and a labour shortage. This is the reality of the economy, gentlemen. Dominic, to you first of all, from the Federal Reserve's point of view, do you think there's any possibility that this kind of data would cause the Fed to hold on to their tight language on Thursday?
I think Short term, yes, I think there's a chance that we will see this tight language continue. But I think markets are beginning to look ahead to the end of this tightening cycle. If we all look 6 to 12 months ahead, I think we're going to find ourselves looking at the end of the cycle. Therefore, we're going to see the strengthening US dollar, which has been so troublesome for emerging markets this year, is going to cease to be such a major threat to other markets, particularly emerging markets, as people look in that direction. Short term, yes, the sentiment will continue, but markets are really beginning to look much further ahead now, and I think a degree of optimism will arise from that.
Can I bring it back to you, Peter, just to finish this conversation? We got the latest CBS Battleground Tracker. It says 225 seats, OK? So 218 is the needed number for a majority. But there is a plus or minus 13 in this data. So there is every possibility the Democrats don't take it. What does it mean for America if the Republicans hold both houses? What would it mean for Trumponomics, for foreign policy? What is the risk if GOP holds both houses?
Well, I think if that happens, Donald Trump will view it as a reaffirmation of what he did in the first, essentially, 2 years. And I would then look for Republicans to do things like repeal the estate tax. I think we could expect Donald Trump to double down on the trade war, and I think his hand would be strengthened in dealing with China. And quite frankly, I think we could expect some very likely firings in the Attorney General's office.
Peter, could I ask you, what does it mean for the hawks, the Lighthizer of this administration, the trade hawks that are ultimately guiding, some would say, trade policy? Is there a risk that we embolden the trade confrontation globally?
Yes, I think if the scenario here is that the Republicans hold on to the House, they basically hold the House and the Senate, I think that will strengthen Donald Trump will redouble on the trade question. It will, in a sense, confirm their view that Americans actually support what they're doing on trade, and it will put, I think, additional pressure on Xi Jinping to make some form of set of concessions to Trump. I don't think Trump needs a whole lot to claim victory. He proved that in the NAFTA negotiations. But you know, if you get an outcome, if you get a gridlock outcome, then I think the Chinese hand is a bit stronger.